I was the First Minister when the pandemic struck. There's a large part of me wishes that I hadn't been, but I was, and I wanted to be the best First Minister I could be during that period. It's for others to judge the extent to which I succeeded.
Were you moved, Trevor?
No.
Okay, explain.
Not in the least. I mean, look, of course, many of us, I mean, I have myself been caught on air at a moment where one emotion or another overtakes you. But I think that there's two separate points here. One is a general point. In the end, you know, people may experience that or not, but this inquiry is not about it's not about the personalities. The fundamental point about this inquiry is that it is a search for some kind of truth that will help us ensure that we are prepared for anything like this again. And I've got to say, I don't like the way it's now sort of being turned into a variety of kind of dramatic performances, a witch hunt about this person or that person, who's had what messages. I don't see how any of this is really actually helping us prepare for the next one. And the second point, which is one about Nicola Sturgeon herself. And I don't quite know how to say this, so I'll say it as directly as I can. Nobody has been more merciless towards her opponents than Nicola Sturgeon. Almost, and I've interviewed her 2 or 3 times myself. She has never hesitated to go after her opponents as people and their character. And we've seen, for example, the message about Boris Johnson, not about what he did. Clown. Yeah, not about what he did, but attacked his character. Now, you may say that's perfectly reasonable, but if I may say so, you cannot do your politics that way and then expect people to feel sympathy with you because you are overwhelmed by the responsibility which you voluntarily accepted. So the answer to your question is no.
All right. There was a lot of conversation about these WhatsApp messages. And, you know, Trevor's right. We need to define what this is about. Is it about holding people to account, or is it about then lessons going forward? And in many other countries, they are holding 2 separate inquiries just to kind of divide those issues up, because otherwise the holding people to account becomes, well, it feels like it becomes politicised to a certain point, and it becomes all about a witch hunt and trying to make people cry in the dock or make people admit to things under pressure. It becomes a sensational appearance rather than the direction, having the direction of let's make sure that if this happens again, we are fully prepared for it. But the WhatsApp messages are going to haunt her forever, Elby, aren't they? Because she finally admitted today that she deleted them. There are WhatsApp messages that just don't exist from March to September 2020, probably in terms of immediate response. That is a hugely crucial period. She promised to give all communications in August 2021 in a Channel 4 interview. Why is she getting into such a pickle about this?
I think the problem with Nicola Sturgeon and the WhatsApp messages, even though I don't actually think it's the most important part of this inquiry, but the problem with Nicola Sturgeon and the WhatsApp messages is because she presents herself as this holier-than-thou politician who goes after Boris Johnson for doing things wrong. And actually, she's found herself having done something wrong. And she's done many things wrong during her premiership as First Minister. Her downfall was terrible. And so I think when you present yourself as this holier-than-thou politician that does everything right, never puts a foot wrong, and goes after other politicians' opponents for doing things wrong, when you are caught falling short, it's just that much more embarrassing for you. But actually, the most important part of this inquiry, from what she said today, was that her biggest regret was not looking down earlier. Because as Trevor said before, in my opinion, what this inquiry is about figuring out what we did wrong and making sure that we don't make those mistakes again. I don't really care whether or not she's crying. I don't know why we focus so much on whether or not female politicians cry.
All of us are falling for it because you know, despite her potentially breaking the law regarding these WhatsApp messages, all the headlines today talk about her becoming choked up with emotion under the responsibility of making
But is that on
decisions.
us as the media? Because
Yes, it is on the media.
It's not important. We're all obsessed as to whether or not Margaret Thatcher cried when she was getting in the car. We're all obsessed about whether or not Theresa May cried when she had to stand down as Prime Minister, whether or not Liz Truss cried when she walked back through the door after she left office after 49 days.
Enough of the crying.
You know, no one cares about that with David Cameron or Boris Johnson. We should be focusing on what these women do in office, not whether or not they're crying after they fall from grace.
Trevor, I wonder what the most important element of today has been for you. Albie makes a good point about the fact that she says she didn't jump the gun on banning mass gatherings in March 2020. She should have made the decision earlier. She talks about the fact that she should have locked down earlier as well. All of that has been overlooked for commentary on her performance. What else stands out to you today?
Well, I have to confess, I haven't followed it that closely. If I'm honest, what stands out to me about the process is, frankly, how poor it's been. I mean, the focus on the machinery, I mean, it's not even what would technically be called machinery of government, but the practice of government officials in communications might be sort of interesting, might be, but it's not very interesting. I mean, what I think is significant is that when she said, as far as I understand it, as I say, I haven't followed the whole thing. When she says, "I wish I'd locked down earlier," or maybe I should have done, I don't think she was asked why. What is the evidence that you have seen subsequently that tells you that you should have done something different? What's the epidemiological evidence that you now understand that you didn't understand then? Those are the things that actually matter, rather than, you know, who kind of said what to when on what day and all that.
Yeah,
I mean,
and whether she used it for political gain to push the agenda of independence.
So I'm afraid that the problem is, Kate, it's kind of hard to answer your question, because if I'm absolutely honest, I don't think I've heard anything very significant yet from either from this session in Scotland or the sessions before, to be honest.
All right, I'm going to finish with a comment from Dominic in Whitby, who's messaged in. And do, by the way, do the same. 87222, start your messages with the word Times if you want to have your say, with Trevor Phillips and Albie Amankona joining us for the next still 15 minutes or so to go. And you can also tweet us at Times Radio. So Dominic in Whitby says, for so long I had so much faith in Nicola Sturgeon and regarded her as an unusual figure of integrity and principle at a time when so many other politicians seemed self-serving, unprincipled and shifty. Then months ago, events brought a change to my perception of her, and that trust evaporated. I'm sad to say that nothing that has happened since has brought it back. Her tearfulness today left me curiously unmoved. There we go. We'll leave the final say to Dominic in Whitby.